Hello and welcome to the mid-year book Freakout tag. This is a very popular and well-known tag across BookTube for many years, which basically allows us to talk through and wrap up our progress so far at this halfway point of the year, some likes, some dislikes and other notable mentions along the way. I have actually completed this tag once before, being last year, my first year on BookTube, however, unfortunately lost all of my footage and was never able to post it. So this is the first version of this tag from me you will be seeing. And I had a really good time going through all of the different prompts and picking books. I am very indecisive, so a lot of these sections may well have more than one book mentioned, but we can forgive that. So I'm going to go through the questions in the order that I wrote them down from watching other people's videos, and I will try not to go into too much detail about each of the books because I don't want this to be an insanely long video. So I'm also going to put my coffee down because I feel like I'm going to be waving my arms around and probably spilling this very hot drink all over my lap, which would not be good. Okay, so kicking things off, the first prompt is the best book you have read this year. Now this straight away was a struggle. This is probably the hardest prompt I had to answer because I really struggle to pinpoint a single favourite of anything. I've had a number of books that I've really enjoyed this year. I haven't had that many 5 stars just yet, but I have had a few. But the book, or rather the series that I kept coming back to, was actually a reread for me, which I read earlier on this year for the third, maybe, time in my life. And I just had to put it as my favourite because it's one of my favourite series of all time. And that is the GREATCOATS series by Sebastian de Castell. So I've talked about these books before many times on my channel. They are absolutely tremendous. So it's adult high fantasy series, 4 books in total, which I read basically back to back, back in about April. So we follow 3 main characters, Falkio, Kest and Brasti, who are greatcoats, and these were the king's travelling magisters, basically, who enforced the king's laws and made sure justice was served in the kingdom. However, by the start of our book, the king has died and the greatcoats have been disbanded and scattered across the kingdom. And we pick up with these 3 main characters who are trying to scrape together some sort of life for themselves and also following out and honouring the king's memory and the king's laws in a way that they wanted the king's memory to be preserved, and also following the individual quests which each of them were given by the king before he died. And obviously this leads to many adventures, many road trips and witty banter between our characters, and it just has the most wonderful feel and the wonderful blend of both high action, high fantasy content, friendship to an absolutely amazing degree. These trio of friends, it's just one of the best written friendships I've ever read, and also some very heartwarming and more emotional sections as well. I absolutely love this series. As I've said, Sebastian de Castell is an author by author for me. He's one of my absolute favourites. I love the way he writes and it really suits this style of this particular series. It's very much got a feel of the 3 Musketeers to it, so if you like that kind of story, you will love the Greatcoats too. And I just can't get enough of them. So definitely the best book, or rather 4 books that I read this year, was the Greatcoats series. The next prompt we have is the best sequel you read, and I'm tied between 2 for this one. So both of these received 5 stars. Both of these are second books in a series and the latest books up to date in those series. The first one is Master ARTIFICER by Justin Call. This is the sequel to Master of Sorrows, which I read last year and gave 5 stars to, and the sequel was also a 5 stars, and if anything was even better than the first book. I absolutely adored this. Again, high fantasy, one of the best fantasy books and series I've ever read. The intricacy of the plots is just incredible, the world building, all of the characters. In the first book, we follow our main character Anev, who is attending this kind of special academy where they are taught to find and contain magical relics. And magic in their world is frowned upon. It's seen as a bad, evil thing. However, Anev is very conflicted because he actually uses magic every day in his life to a great positive effect for himself. It helps him manage his disability. And so he's very torn between what he's taught in this academy and what he experiences personally. And we see our group of main characters at this academy, first of all, undergoing kind of trials to prove themselves, to be able to go out on quests and retrieve these relics. And then we also start to see them exposed to the wider world and all of the complications which follow. The action is absolutely ramped up in the second book. We follow a selection of the characters from the first story in various different settings without giving too many spoilers, and it's just absolutely incredible, this series. It's billed as kind of a villain origin story, which in the first book I was so skeptical about because our main character is just lovely. Whereas in the second one you do start to see how certain choices that are made and events that happen push him in a certain direction, which may well start to put the feelers out for a little bit of villainous activity, and I am living for this series. I'm so excited for the third one to come out, whenever that may be. But definitely one of the best sequels ever, not just this year. The other one I wanted to mention was also a 5-star, and another one which I've read very recently actually, following on from reading the first book last year, and that is The Fires of Vengeance by Evan Winter, which is the second book following on from Rage of Dragons. I loved this series. Also another high fantasy series, this one based on kind of African culture and mythology, obviously involving dragons, as the title of the first one suggests. We follow our main character Tao, who is basically out for revenge. So he has been brought up in this very hierarchical society, being looked down on as one of the lowest of the low, and his family has been kind of persecuted, if you like, over the years. Culminating in Tao's father actually being killed by one of the soldiers or warriors of a higher rank in society, and Tao wants to prove that his father was killed unjustly and that he himself can be just as good a warrior as any of these others, and that he can be strong and get revenge for all of these things that have been done to him throughout his life. So we follow this story of revenge basically, and of Tao putting himself through the most horrible of circumstances to prove himself as a warrior and to really make progress in this world. It's very political in places. It also has a lot of quite graphic war type detail in it, but I love all of that stuff, and I just found this such a captivating story and a little different from a lot of the fantasy I'd read before. So thoroughly enjoyed this sequel, which continues basically the plot line and the story right from the end of the first book. And again, I really want the third one in the series to come out because I need more of this world. It's really good. The next one we have is a new release which you have not yet read this year, and for this one I have decided to go with The Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake. Now this one is so well known in the book community at the moment. It, I believe, has been broadcast all over TikTok, which I personally do not have, but I think that's why its popularity is so high at the moment. I came across this one through a couple of different booktubers who received ARCs of it, I think last year. Wasn't sure if I would want to pick it up or not, so I understand this is a dark academia book, which I personally really enjoy. I love the aesthetic. I love that kind of toxic friendship group in an academic setting kind of story. So I did want to pick it up for that reason, but I was a little concerned that it might be overhyped. But I've heard that it is having a re-release this year. In fact, I think it's already out in hardback and is due to come out in paperback soon. I'm not sure. Following being picked up by traditional publishing by Tor. So I do want to get to this one. I've decided this will probably be one of my early autumn reads, being dark academia, to really get me in that kind of mindset for autumnal reading. I don't really know anything about the story other than it follows a group of friends in a dark academia kind of setting, but I've heard they're very strong and believable characters in this story, and I just really look forward to picking up something a little bit different and seeing if it does indeed live up to all of the hype it's received. The next one is along the same lines as the previous prompt, and that is a most anticipated release. So this is a book which has not yet been released at all. And for this one, I've gone with yet another popular one on BookTube at the moment, and that is Babel or Babel, I'm not quite sure which one we're supposed to say, by R.F. Kuang. Now, again, I've heard really good things about this. Again, it has dark academia vibes, which I am really enjoying. And I'm so excited to get to this one. So I understand that there is a lot of talk around language and origins of language in this story, and also some more kind of heavier themes of colonialism and things like that, which I think would make a really interesting combination, actually. I also believe it's set, in part at least, in Oxford in England, which is one of my favourite cities, so I'm really excited to get into this one, and I've heard nothing but good things from people who've received ARCs of this book, so I have pre-ordered it. I will be receiving this book in September, and fingers crossed we'll absolutely love it. Next up, we have the biggest disappointment for this year, and I have two books to mention for this. So first of all is one that I read fairly recently, actually, for the Whatever-a-thon readathon in June, and that is the novella Galatea by Madeline Miller. Now, I had loved all of Madeline Miller's works that I'd read previously. I loved Circe and The Song of Achilles, and went into this one hoping for very much the same vibe and the same feeling. And I just was underwhelmed with this book. It was very, very short, which I think was part of the problem. I didn't feel like we got any development of the characters, of the world or the story or anything. It just felt like a very short character study to me, with a lot of gaps and a lack of detail in general. I didn't particularly get what we were supposed to get out of this story. I found it quite strange. I also couldn't figure out if we were supposed to be in a traditional Greek mythology type world, or if it was meant to be more modern and just themed around that. I really just didn't get this book. It didn't gel with me at all. I'm sure other people have loved it, and it's nothing against Madeline Miller as a writer, because I do love her way with words and I have loved her other novels, but this one was just a miss for me this year. The other one I want to mention for this is actually the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan. Now, this was a favourite series of mine when I first started reading the books a couple of years ago. I've been working my way very slowly over the past couple of years through this series, and I think this year have read books 7 and 8 of the about 15 that we have. And I've really found the last couple to be quite disappointing. I think they're still good books. It's still a brilliant fantasy world with amazing characters and world building and magic and geography and everything else. It's a super intricate and very, very epic fantasy series. But in terms of plot, I've found the last couple of books kind of boring in places, and also really badly paced. So we focus hugely on certain, what appear to be quite trivial things throughout the story, and then the main points of the action are crammed in right at the end and almost rushed through. And I just haven't got on with these books so well, and I haven't found myself wanting to pick up the next one, even though it's a major fantasy series that I should and did absolutely love when I started reading it. So they have also been a bit disappointing for me, but fingers crossed when I do make it to the next one, things will be looking up and the series will come round a little bit and end up being a lot more captivating as it had started. Next up, we have the biggest surprise of the year for you, and for this one I decided to go with Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Su Lin Tan. I read this quite early on in the year, again having seen people on BookTube reading arcs and things of this, and I actually found a copy in my library when it was released and thought, you know what, I will pick this up and give it a try. I wasn't sure if I was going to like this or not. I liked the premise of the story, of it being based on Chinese mythology. I love anything mythology based, and I don't know much about Chinese myths, so I was intrigued to learn more. But I'd heard there was a bit of a love triangle in here, and I just thought it might be a little bit boring and stereotyped and kind of all been done before kind of story, but absolutely was not the case. I ended up really, really loving this book. I think this was one of my 5 stars actually, and I ordered the book myself to arrive when the paperback's released, so that should be coming in the next month or two. But I absolutely loved the story. I think the way it was written was beautifully lyrical and fantastical, but also kept you grounded in the plot. There was enough going on in the plot for it not just to be a whimsical mythology read. So we follow our main character, Jinyin, I believe her name was, and she is the daughter of the moon goddess, as you would expect. And she basically has been brought up in secret on the moon. Nobody knows she exists, and she is being kind of hidden away by her mother for her own safety. However, an accidental discovery of some magic which she possesses ends up with her almost being discovered, and she has to go on the run basically down to the human world. And she trains there with one of the princes and learns how to fight and how to be a warrior. She also ends up going out with one of the army captains and going on all these quests for mythical beings and things, and it's just the most wonderful blend of different activities. Sorry if the setup or the lighting has changed slightly. I just had to get up to close the window because someone started drilling outside and the sun has also gone in, so apologies if things look a little different. So I was saying about Daughter of the Moon Goddess, I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I was really pleasantly surprised how captivated by the story I was and how fresh it seemed as a story, considering the fears that I'd had that it would be very generic. I was also surprisingly invested in the love triangle, and for a long time wasn't sure which way I wanted it to go. So I'm sure all will pick up and carry on in the same vein in the sequel to this, which comes out hopefully in the next year or so. I really am hopeful that it won't take too long for this one to come out. And yeah, a thoroughly wonderful and surprising book for me. The next one we have is a new favourite author. Now, for this one, I've decided to go with an author who I've only read one book from fairly recently, but I just know is going to be someone whose books I will gravitate towards when I want to feel happy and I want something easy and reliable that I can pick up, and that is Verity Bright, which actually is a pseudonym for a married couple, I believe, who write books together. And the series that I'm mentioning that I've read the first book from is the Eleanor Swift murder mystery series. These are basically your epitome of cosy murder mystery books. They are set in the 1920s in England following Lady Eleanor Swift, who has returned from her adventures all around the world and has decided to take up her inheritance and move into the country manor house where her uncle used to live. And it's basically her investing, if you like, into countryside British society and figuring out how it all is supposed to work when she's been such an independent free spirit for the past few years, and also solving a murder which conveniently happens upon her doorstep. I love the kind of amateur detective vibe. I love historical murder mysteries. It's one of my favourite things to read. This one is very light and fluffy in a lot of the tone of the story, but definitely captivating plots. And as I said, I know this is going to be a series that I will just dip into when I want something comforting. Really reminds me as well of the Phryne Fisher TV series that I think was on Netflix a few years ago. I absolutely adored that. Another 1920s murder-solving heroine, and I see a lot of parallels between the two. So definitely a new favourite author from my point of view, and someone that I will be reading a lot more from in the future. Next one we have is a new fictional crush. Now, I haven't got a response for this. I don't tend to go in for fictional crushes. There are a lot of romances within stories that I can appreciate, but I just don't really buy into the crushing on a fictional character thing, so sorry, I don't have an answer for that one. Next up we have a new favourite character. Now this one I do buy into very much, and for this we are returning to the world of the Greatcoats, and specifically a character who was introduced in the Tales of the Greatcoats short story collection, which I read earlier this year, that character being Estevar Boros. Now this is a new character which we hadn't met in the Greatcoats quartet, the original books, but who I really, really hope we get more of in the future because he is absolutely wonderful. So he is another of the Greatcoats, but one we haven't previously encountered. And he's just the most wonderfully atmospheric character to read about. You can visualise everything about him. I love the way he speaks. I love the way he solves his crimes, and well, not always crimes, but he presents these cases, basically. He appears in a couple of the short stories, and I really, really hope we get more content from him. He does remind me a bit of Poirot, which I absolutely love, as you know, big Agatha Christie fan. But yeah, please more Estevar Boros. I want to read an entire novel about this character. He is tremendous. Next up, we have a book that made you cry, and again, I have no answer, I'm afraid. I very, very rarely cry at books, and there has been nothing this year which has even remotely made me tear up. I feel a lot when I read, I just don't outwardly express it. I can count on one hand the number of books that have actually made me cry in the past. But this year has not yet had one. Who knows in the future? There may be in the second half of the year, but yeah, no answer for that one just yet. Next up, we have a book that made you happy, and again, we are looking at the Greatcoats for this one. So, Tales of the Greatcoats that I just mentioned, the short story collection. I think I have smiled the most while reading that book of anything I've read this year so far. It was just so wonderful to be back with those characters and to re-experience that world, which I absolutely adored in the first series of books. And also, as I said, to meet new characters and to see some of our existing characters in new settings and new ways, and it was just the most heartwarming, wonderful experience. I flew through it and I absolutely adored this book, so definitely one which made me very, very happy while consuming it. Next up, we have Your Most Beautiful Purchase. Now, I own lots and lots of beautiful books, but a couple which did come to mind was, first of all, East of the Sun, West of the Moon by Jackie Morris, which I read earlier on in the year for Polathon. I have a beautiful small edition, which is illustrated with lots and lots of beautiful watercolour images. I will insert a couple over the top of this video that I filmed while I was reading this during Polathon. It was such a beautiful story. It's a retelling of a myth, which I absolutely love. I've read several books based on, and it was just so wonderful to consume this version of the story with the wonderful illustrations to go alongside. I need to have a look if there are any more books in this publishing series because they are absolutely stunning. The other notable mention I have for this is Mythopedia, which again is gloriously illustrated. I have never seen such colourful and immersive images as these, and again following a range of different mythical settings and characters, and this is just such an art piece, this book, and I absolutely love it. So the two of these are my most beautiful purchases to date this year. And then finally, the tag asks us, what do you most need to read for the rest of the year? Now, there are many things I could say for this one. Lots of series to continue with, lots of new books I want to pick up. The ones I'm going to mention, first of all, is a series continuation, and that is the Wheel of Time series. So, as I said earlier on in this video, I have been kind of disappointed with the last couple of books that I have read in this series, but I do want to power through and finish off because I'm over halfway now with this series, and as a big fantasy reader, I think it would be sacrilege for me to DNF this series and not carry on. I really want to know how the series concludes, so I will try to be continuing and perhaps even finishing off the series during the second part of the year. The other thing I want to reference is not a specific book, but rather a list of books. So I always have an ongoing list of specific types of books that I want to read at different times of year, and I have been building up quite an extensive collection of autumnal witchy themed books that I want to get to during the second half of the year, probably September onwards. And I'm so excited to get to all of those. So I definitely want to make a good dent into all of these books. These are mainly books I've picked up on from watching other people's videos or from things friends have recommended to me. So I have at least 25 books on that list, and I'm really, really excited to make a dent into those. So I think that's all I have for you today. I hope all of that was somewhat comprehensive. I feel like I've rambled quite a lot there, but I just get so excited talking about my favourite books. And let me know in the comments below if any of these are favourites of yours, if you agree with me about my disappointing reads. Anything else you'd like to chat to me about is always great. And I hope you've had a successful first year of reading so far. I think to date my Goodreads target, let me just check for you, I have read 62 books so far of my proposed 110 for the year, so I am definitely on schedule. I'm doing very, very well, and hopefully this will continue during the second half of the year. So without further ado, I'm going to wrap up this video here. Leave me a like down below if you enjoyed it. Chat to me in the comments about anything I've mentioned in this video, any other books you'd like to discuss with me. I always love to chat to you. And please consider subscribing if you'd like to see more content from me. It really, really means a lot and helps grow my channel too. Thank you for watching. I will see you very soon with the next video, so goodbye for now.